Okay, as I said, I'm not going to be offended if you don't want to now listen to the reading, so if you want to take off or if you've got to go, that's just fine. We'll just make fun of you after you're out the door. All right, so I generally, when I do readings, different authors approach readings in different ways. I really prefer to read unpublished material, things that people haven't seen. If you come to the reading, I could do a short reading if you wanted me to of Gathering Storm, but half of you have already heard that at book signings, and all of you, or almost all of you, have read it, some of you multiple times already, and so, you know, when you come to a reading, I like to do that. So I like to do unpublished stuff. I'm going to give you several options, and we'll probably do 2 of these, okay? Because I like to do a short reading, and then talk about the piece, and then do another short reading. So here's what we have as options for unpublished work. I can do a reading from The Way of Kings. You've already heard me talk about this, many of you. It's the epic fantasy that I have coming out in August. There's a copy of it, one of 35 advanced reader manuscripts they did, up at the charity auction. So we're hoping that gets a lot for charity. I didn't know that was coming until Paul Stevens said, "Do you mind?" And so those are very rare. I only got 2 of them, which I sent out to who did I send those to? Lois Bujold and Pat Rothfuss. So I don't even have any anymore. So yeah, I can do a reading from that, but I just want to make that aside. Go a bit on that. You can read the whole book. I can do a reading from the 4th Alcatraz book. Alcatraz. Let's see, what did I name that one? What's that?
I don't remember.
Alcatraz versus the Shattered Lens. So we've got Alcatraz 4. If you haven't heard from the Alcatraz books, they're supposed to be funny. Hopefully they are funny, but they're supposed to be funny. I can do a reading from that. That comes out in December. I also have several books that I could read from. I'm just going to pitch 2 of, or not pitch, but offer 2 of them. Projects that were either in progress or I had a few chapters done when the Wheel of Time happened, and I haven't been able to work on since. But these are kind of perpetual floating chapters. Sometimes when I need a break for a day, I will write a chapter of one of these to get the wiggles out. And so neither of them are finished. The first one is called The King's Necromancer. And is a YA necromancer story, and where the necromancer is the protagonist. And the other one is called Steelheart, which is an apocalyptic, dark future superhero book in a world where all people who gain superpowers turn out to be villains. And so there's a superhero apocalypse, and it's actually making the rounds in Hollywood right now, even though I haven't written the book yet. My proposal, my agent said, I'm going to do something with this. And so now we actually have an offer for a film deal on a book that I haven't written yet, which is pretty kind of weird. Well, that's an aside. I do lots of asides, by the way. Alcatraz got optioned by DreamWorks Animation, and so suddenly people started saying, who is this guy? So someone snatched up Mistborn, moved rights for Mistborn have been sold, and suddenly people are paying a lot of attention, and so now my agent is coming to me and saying, let's start shopping stuff right now, early, and so I just gave him some stuff, and boom, and so all of a sudden everybody's talking about me in Hollywood, which is weird, because Hollywood people are weird. No offense, Larry, if Larry's in here. But he will tell you straight up how Hollywood people can be. They're just in a different world. It's not bad, it's not good, but they do live in a different world. So let's do it by a raise of hands. Raise your hand for only one, and I will pick the top 2, and we'll do readings from those. Who wants to hear from The Way of Kings? Okay. Who wants to hear from Alcatraz 4? Okay, who wants to hear from The King's Necromancer? Okay, who wants to hear from Steelheart's? Okay, it looks like Steelheart and Way of Kings won. So, let me pull open Way of Kings here. All right. Way of Kings is formatted somewhat, there's a whole lot going on in this book. So I can read a lot of different types of scenes to you. The prologue is in the back of the Warbreaker paperback, so I'm probably not going to read that. You can go read it yourself. It's pretty fun. It shows off the magic system. I could read the prelude, which is the prologue to the prologue. Thank you, Robert Jordan, for teaching me to do that. Yeah, I've got 2 prologues, but yeah. Or I can read from any given number of chapters. So let's see, what should I do here? Chapter 3? That'll work. Chapter 3.
Which one has explosions?
Okay. Chapter 3 has, why don't I just read around a couple of places? I'll just grab a couple of random paragraphs so you can kind of see what the book is about. Chapter 3, well, I'll just go with it. Carbranc, city of bells, was not a place that Shalon had ever imagined she would visit. Though she often dreamed of traveling, she'd expected to spend her early life sequestered in her family's manor, only escaping through the books of her father's library. She'd expected to marry one of her father's allies, then spend the rest of her life sequestered in his manor. But expectations were like fine pottery. The harder you held to them, the more likely they were to crack. She found herself breathless, clutching her leather-bound drawing pad to her chest as longshoremen pulled the ship into the dock. Carbranc was enormous. Built up the side of a steep incline, the city was wedge-shaped, like it was built in a wide crack, with the open side toward the ocean. The buildings were blocky, with square windows, and appeared to have been constructed from some kind of mud or daub. They were painted bright colors, reds and oranges, but occasional blues and yellows, too. She could hear the bells already, tinkling in the wind, ringing with pure voices. She had to strain her neck to look up toward the city's loftiest rim. Carbranc was like a mountain towering over her. How many people lived in a place like this? Thousands? Tens of thousands? She shivered again, daunted yet excited, then blinked pointedly, fixing the image of the city in her memory. Sailors rushed about. The Wind's Pleasure was a narrow, single-sailed vessel, barely large enough for her, the captain, his wife, and a half-dozen crew. It seemed so small at first. But Captain Zosbeck was a calm and cautious man, an excellent sailor, even if he was a pagan. He guided the ship with care along the coast, always finding a sheltered cove to ride out the high storms. The captain oversaw the work as men secured the mooring. Zosbeck was a short man, even-shouldered with Shalon, and he wore his long white Thalen eyebrows up in a curious spiked pattern. It was like he had 2 waving fans above his eyes, a foot long each. He wore a simple knit cap and a silver buttoning black coat. She'd imagined him getting that scar on his jaw in a furious sea battle with pirates. The day before, she'd been disappointed to hear that it had been caused by a loose tackle during rough weather. His wife, Ashlev, was already walking down the gangplank to register their vessel. The captain saw Shalon inspecting him, and so walked over. He was a business connection of her family, long trusted by her father. That was good, since the plan she and her brothers had concocted had contained no place for her bringing lady-in-waiting or nurse along. That plan made Shalon nervous, very, very nervous. She hated being duplicitous, but the financial state of her house, well, they either needed a spectacular infusion of wealth or some other edge in local Baden-House politics. Otherwise, they wouldn't last the year. First things first, Shalon thought, forcing herself to be calm. Find Yasna Colin, assuming she hasn't moved off without you again. I've sent a lad on your behalf, Brightness, Zosbeck said. If the princess is still here, we shall soon know. Shalon nodded gratefully, still clutching her drawing pad. Out in the city, there were people everywhere. Some wore familiar clothing, trousers and shirts that laced up the front for the men, skirts and colorful blouses for the women. Those could have been from her homeland, Yakivet, but Carbranc was a free city, a small, politically fragile city-state. It held little territory, but had docks open to all ships that passed, and it asked no questions about nationality or status. People flowed to it. That meant many of the people she saw were exotic. Those single-sheet wraps would mark a man or woman from Tashik, far to the west. The long coats, enveloping down to the ankles but open in the front like cloaks, where were those from? She'd rarely seen so many parshmen as she noted walking the docks, carrying cargo on their backs. Like the parshmen her father had owned, these were stout and thick of limb, with their odd marbled skin, some parts pale or black, others deep crimson. The model pattern was unique to each individual. After chasing Yasna Colin from town to town for the better part of 6 months, Shalon was beginning to think that she'd never catch the woman. Was the princess avoiding her? No, that didn't seem likely. Shalon just wasn't important enough to wait for. Brightness Yasna Colin was one of the most powerful women in the world, and one of the most infamous. She was the only member of a faithful Voran house who was a professed heretic. Shalon tried not to grow anxious. Most likely they discovered that Yasna had moved on again. The wind's pleasure would dock for the night, and Shalon would negotiate a price with the captain, steeply discounted because of her family's investments into Zazbek's shipping business, to take her to the next port. Captain, a sailor said, rushing up the gangplank. He wore only a vest and loose baggy trousers, and had the darkly tanned skin of one who worked in the sun. No message, sir. Dock register says that Yasna hasn't left yet. Ha! The captain said, turning to Shalon. The hunt is over. Bless the heralds, Shalon said softly. The captain smiled, flamboyant eyebrows looking like streaks of light coming from his eyes. It must be your beautiful face that brought us this favorable wind. The windspren themselves were entranced by you, brightness Shalon, and led us here. Shalon blushed, considering a response that wasn't particularly proper. Ah, the captain said, pointing at her. I can see you have a reply. I see it in your eyes, young miss. Spit it out. Words weren't meant to be kept inside, you see. They are free creatures, and if locked away, will unsettle the stomach. It's not polite, Shalon protested. Zazbek bellowed and laughed. Months of travel, and still you claim that. I keep telling you that we're sailors. We forgot how to be polite the moment we first set foot on a ship. She smiled. She'd been trained by stern nurses and tutors to hold her tongue. Unfortunately, her brothers had been even more determined in encouraging her to do the opposite. She'd made a habit of entertaining them with witty comments when nobody else was near. She thought fondly of hours spent by the crackling great room hearth, the younger 3 of her 4 brothers huddled around her, listening as she made sport of their fathers who was sycophant or traveling ardent. She'd often fabricate silly versions of conversations to fill the mouths of people they could see but not hear. That had established in her what her nurses referred to as an insolent streak. Unfortunately for them, the sailors were even more appreciative of witty comment than her brothers had been. Well, Shalon said to the captain, blushing but still eager to speak, I was just thinking this. You say that my beauty coaxed the winds to deliver us to Carbranc with haste, but wouldn't that imply that on our other trips, my lack of beauty was to blame for us arriving late? Well, so in reality, Shalon said, you're telling me that I'm beautiful precisely 1/6 of the time. Nonsense, young miss. You're like a morning sunrise, you are. Like a sunrise. By that you mean entirely too crimson, she pulled at her long red hair, and prone to making men grouchy when they see me. He laughed, and several of the sailors nearby joined in. All right then, Captain Zazbek said. You're like a flower. She grimaced. I'm allergic to flowers. He raised an eyebrow. No, really. I think they're quite captivating, but if you were to give me a bouquet, you'd soon find me in a fit so energetic that it would have you searching the walls for stray freckles I might have blown free with the force of my sneezes. Well, if that be true, I still say you're as pretty as a flower. If I am, then young men my age must be afflicted with that same allergy, for they keep their distance from me quite noticeably. She grimaced. Now, see, I told you this wasn't polite. Young women should not act in such an irritable way. Ah, young miss, the captain said, tipping his knit cap toward her. The lads and I will miss your clever tongue. I'm not sure what we'll do without you. Sail, likely, she said, and eat, and sing, and watch the waves. All the things you do now, only you shall have rather more time to accomplish it if you won't be stumbling across a youthful girl as she sits on your dock sketching and mumbling to herself. But you have my thanks, Captain, for a trip that was wonderful, if somewhat exaggerated in length. He tipped his cap to her in acknowledgement. We will stop there. So, Shalon is one of our main protagonists. Chapter 3 is where she first appears. This was an interesting book to write from many aspects. I've been wanting to do something for a long time in which a culture that had divided the various arts and sciences into male and female pursuits. I've long been interested in the power of literacy and the fact that throughout most of history, a very few select people were literate. Few select people could read. In fact, throughout most of history, the kings and nobility couldn't read. They had scribes to do that for them. And yet, in our era, information and the ability to read is equal to power. And it's very hard for us to wrap our minds around a king not wanting to know how to read, but that was something that the scribes did, and you just hired a good reader to read stuff to you. And that existed in the past. And I wanted to work with that and play with that and deal with information. So Shalon is actually based in part on Pliny the Elder, if any of you know who that is. And in part is based on a little bit on Darwin, doing his voyages and doing sketchbooks, and a little bit on Da Vinci, kind of melded together into this one person who is really wanting to be a scholar, but has been sent by her family on something of a non-scholarly pursuit, and it'll come out in the books as you read it. So she became a very fascinating character because of this conflict between her desire to be a scholar and her family's needs for her to do other things with her ability to write and things like this. And so actually in this culture, generally the women are literate and the men aren't. The men fight and the women act as scribes. And when you actually, in a war, you will bring in your officers as teams. The man to fight, the woman to do administration. And they kind of act as this, you don't, it's considered much less useful to get an unmarried guy because you don't get a scribe, and an unmarried woman, you don't get the warrior together, and so you get this sort of interesting team dynamic happening. And so, anyway, that is part of The Way of Kings, and that took enough time that, let's see, do you guys want to laugh a little bit more?
Yes.
Okay. Most of this book is not humor, though Shalon is cultivating something of a witty tongue, so I do have some of those exchanges, but I do have one scene that, in this book, if you were there in what I was talking about in the How to Write panel we did before, my lecture, I talked about the challenge of creating scope in a novel like this, where I tend to not have the long traveling sections like Robert Jordan did in The Wheel of Time, which he used to create this massive scope for this world. And I was challenged by the fact that I generally keep people in the same places. It's how I like to write, it's how I like to tell my stories. And so for this book, to encourage the feeling of scope, near the end of the process of writing the book, I wrote 6 essentially short stories set in the world that are tied to what's happening with the main thoughts of all the characters, and I interspersed them and called them interludes. So they don't actually have chapter numbers. You'll get to it and it'll say interlude number this, and you'll know it's a short, only like going to be like 5 pages long. Look at a different place in the world with a different, completely different sensibility and these sorts of things to start to build for what's going to happen in later books, where some of these areas become very important to the series, and some of these characters actually become more important later on. So this is one of the interludes. Axes the Collector groaned, lying on his back, skull pounding with a headache. He opened his eyes and looked down the length of his body. He was naked. Blight it all, he thought. Well, best to check and see if he was hurt too badly. His toes pointed to the sky. The nails were a deep blue color, not uncommon for an Nemean man like himself. He tried to wiggle them, and pleasingly, they actually moved. Well, that's something, he said, resting his head back. It made a squishing sound as it touched something soft, likely a bit of rotting garbage. Yes, that was what it was. He could smell it now, pungent and rank. He focused on his nose, sculpting his body so he could no longer smell. Ah, he thought, much better. Now if he could only banish the pounding in his head. Really, did the sun have to be so garish overhead? He closed his eyes. You're still in my alley, a gruff voice said from behind him. That voice had awakened him in the first place. I shall vacate it presently, Axes promised. You owe me rent, 1 night's sleep. In an alleyway? Finest alleyway in Cassitor? Ah, is that where I am then? Excellent. A few heartbeats of mental focus finally banished the headache. He opened his eyes and this time found the sunlight quite pleasant. Brick walls rose toward the sky on either side of him, overgrown with a crusty red lichen. Small heaps of rotting tubers were scattered around him. No, they weren't scattered. They looked like they'd been arranged carefully. Odd, that. They were likely the source of the scents he'd noticed earlier. Best to leave his sense of smell inhibited. He sat up, stretching, checking his muscles. All seemed to be in working order, though he had quite a few bruises. He'd deal with those in a bit. Now, he said, turning, you wouldn't happen to have a spare pair of pants, would you? The owner of the voice turned out to be a scraggly bearded man sitting on a box at the back of the alleyway. Axes didn't recognize him, nor did he recognize the location. That wasn't surprising, considering that he'd been beaten, robbed, and left for dead. Again. The things I do in the name of scholarship, he thought with a sigh. His memory was returning. Cassator was a large Iriali city, second in size only to Rallaloran. He'd come here by design. He'd also gotten himself drunk by design. Perhaps he should have picked his drinking companions more carefully. I'm going to guess that you don't have a spare pair of pants, Axie said, standing and inspecting the tattoos on his arm. And if you did, I'd suggest that you wear them yourself. Is that a lattice sack you have on? You owe me rent, the man grumbled, and payment for destroying the temple of the northern god. Odd, Axie said, looking over his shoulder toward the alleyway's opening. There was a busy street beyond. The good people of Cassator would not likely take well to his nudity. I don't recall destroying any temples. Normally I'm quite cognizant of that sort of thing. You took out half of Hatmon Street, the beggar said. Number of homes as well. I'll let that slide. Mighty kind of you. Well, they've been wicked lately. Axis frowned, looking back at the beggar. He followed the man's gaze, looking down at the ground. The heaps of rotting vegetables had been placed in a very particular arrangement, like a city. Ah, Axie said, moving his foot, which had been planted on a small square of vegetable. That was a bakery, the beggar said. Terribly sorry. The family was away. Oh, well, that's a relief. They were worshipping at the temple. The one that I smashed with your head? Yes. Oh. Well, I'm certain you'll be kind to their souls. The beggar narrowed his eyes at him. I'm still trying to decide how you fit into things. Are you a void bringer or a herald? Void bringer, I'm afraid, Axie said. I mean, I did destroy a temple. The beggar's eyes grew more suspicious. Only the sacred cloth can banish me, Axie continued, and since you don't... Oh, I say, what is that you're holding? The beggar looked down at his hand, which was touching one of the ratty blankets draped over his equally ratty boxes. He perched atop them like a god looking down over his people. Poor fool, Axie thought. It was really time to be moving on. Wouldn't want to bring any bad luck down upon the addled fellow. The beggar held up the blanket. Axie shied back, raising his hands. That made the beggar smile with a grin that could have used a few more teeth. He hopped off his box, holding the blanket up warningly. Axie shied away. The beggar laughed and threw the blanket at him. Axie snatched it from the air and shook a fist at the beggar. Then he retreated from the alleyway while wrapping the blanket around his waist. And lo, the beggar said from behind, the foul beast was banished. And lo, Axie said, fixing the blanket in place, the foul beast avoided imprisonment for public indecency. The Iriali were very particular about their chastity laws. And they were very particular about a lot of things. Of course, that could be said for most peoples. The only difference was the things they were particular about. Axie the collector drew his share of stares, not because of unconventional clothing. Area was on the northwestern rim of Roshar, and its weather therefore tended to be much warmer than places like Alethkar or even Azir. A number of the golden-haired Iriali men went about wearing only waist wraps, their skin painted various colors and patterns. Even Axie's tattoos weren't that odd here. Perhaps he drew stares because of his blue nails and deep blue crystalline eyes. Amians, even Sia Amians, were rare. And perhaps it was because he cast a shadow in the wrong way, toward light instead of away from it. It was a small thing, and the shadows weren't long with the sun so high. But those who noticed muttered or jumped out of the way. Likely they had heard of his kind. It hadn't been that long since the scouring of his homeland, just long enough for stories and legends to have crept into the general knowledge. Perhaps someone important would take exception to him and have him brought before a local magistrate. Wouldn't be the first time. He'd learned long ago not to worry. When the curse of kind followed you, you learned to take it what happened as it happened. He began to whistle softly to himself, inspecting his tattoos and ignoring those observing enough to gawk. I remember writing something somewhere, he thought, looking over his wrist and turning his arm over and trying to see if there were any new tattoos on the back. Like all Amians, he could change the color and markings of his skin at will. And that was convenient, as when you were regularly robbed of everything you owned, it was difficult to keep a proper notebook. And so he kept his notes on his skin, at least until he returned to a safe location and transcribed them. Hopefully he hadn't gotten so drunk that he'd written his observations someplace inconvenient. He'd done that once, and reading the mess required 2 mirrors and a very confused vaping attendant. Ah, he thought, discovering a new entry near the inside of his left elbow. He read it awkwardly, shuffling down the incline. Test successful, it read. Have noted spren who appear only when one is severely intoxicated. Appear as small brown bubbles clinging to objects nearby. Further testing may be needed to prove that they were more than a drunken hallucination. I will stop there. What's that? 5 minutes. Okay. So I probably won't read from Steelheart. I can do that some other time. I might read another little short thing here. I'll just talk about it. So another one of the big concepts that I'm dealing with Way of Kings is I wanted to explore some of the concepts of personification. If you're familiar with Asian mythologies, they ascribe personification to most things. A rock will have a spirit. A tree will have a spirit. Chairs will have a spirit to them. Everything has a spirit within it. And in this world, I'm approaching that by looking at having emotions, feelings, and abstract concepts be personified as a type of thing we call spren. Half fairy, half spirit, these things will appear. For instance, if someone is really, really excited, excitement spren will pop up around them. These little things that appear around them like, excitement spren are like little streamers of red that zip up from the ground and then wave in the air. Pain spren are these little orange things that look like sinew or muscles that will crawl up out of the ground and cluster around your wounds if they can get to them. Fear spren are globs of purplish goo that'll ooze out of the walls and from the ground around you. And some of these are more intelligent than others. Many are just these kind of just interesting personifications, and they have to deal with the magic and everything that's happening in the books. And so this guy, Axes the Collector, has made it his life's work to try and personally observe every type of spren there is, which is quite difficult since a lot of them don't appear in all situations. Even when everything that you meet is right. So anyway, this is just one of the things I'm dealing with the story, one of the concepts. It's been very fun to use, though it's been very hard to make sure that when the spren appear, it doesn't look comic booky. It could be very easy for it to kind of turn into you fall over and the stars spin around your head. I had to really work to stay away from that sort of thing, so I had to make them each very kind of distinct and different, like the red streamers that come up and flap around you, and then will vanish as your excitement fades and things like this. And it also we were talking a little bit about Perrin and his ability to smell emotions and how kind of envious I was of that because it gave a visual manifestation. And so I kind of took this direction where I could give a visual manifestation, not just of emotion, but of all sorts of abstract concepts that can occur that people just in this world are used to and rely upon and look at. So that's one of the interludes from Axes the Collector. I'm running really low on time. I don't know if there's anything else I could read in here. The problem is, I've given you just like little snippets, but it's a 400,000 word book. Like I said, 2 prologues, plus the first chapter is from a character that doesn't show up again, so it's really got 3 prologues. I'm just disguising them as different names. If this had been one of Jim's books, it would have just been 3 scenes in a big long prologue followed by chapter 1. But I felt I couldn't get away with that in the same way he did, so I named one the prelude to the series, one the prologue to the book, and the other one chapter 1 that's not really chapter 1. So the book really starts in chapter 2. But, this is, it's just, I'm setting up a lot of things and a lot of stuff's going on. So you can go poke through the book if they let you touch it in the auction, and you can read the end of more of Shallan's chapter if you want, or you can go and you can read the prelude and things like that. But that's the Way of Kings, and I think I'll just go ahead and end there. Thank you guys for listening.